Well, as Eric and I walk down this lost highway together, we hit the big ones, right? The things that come to mind right away. We talk about the Mothman, or we talk about, Bigfoot or
Loch
whatever.
Ness.
We've got a lot of these big ones, and we've talked a lot about the list. And if you don't know, the list is just this list of topics we got. I think it's about 350 items long right now. And I believe Eric and I have more to add today even. And so I've come up with this idea that maybe will help bring to light maybe lesser known stories that him and I had not heard of before. Hopefully you hadn't heard before.
Which some are, I think, the most intriguing and fascinating episodes.
And so what I did was I added a column of numbers 1 through 12 and a column of numbers 1 through 31 and sorted them as if they were days on a calendar, random numbers, and looked at the numbers to the date that this podcast would come out. And what popped up was a story known as the Bothell Hell House, a haunting story of a house in Seattle suburbs. I don't want to say demonic because at times it's definitely seems malevolent or evil, but it doesn't quite come across as demonic. And
almost poltergeist-ish.
There are definitely some allegations of potential hoaxing involved. But yeah, like it's very reminiscent of the Poltergeist movie, really.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very similar in the style, other than you don't have Zelda Rubinstein disappearing through a portal or, any of that stuff. But still, very, very strange story that I knew nothing about prior to that. I had maybe seen it as a headline somewhere, so I just jotted it down. And so that's tonight's topic, is the Bothell Hell House.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Now, like I said, this takes place in a quiet suburb of Seattle, is also known as the Washington State Poltergeist Case, or Demons in Seattle. And apparently, it has plagued at least 3 families, according to the story. There was the family that lived there prior to the guy who we're going to talk about most tonight. Was it named Keith?
Keith Lander.
Then you have Keith's story, which seems to be the bulk of it. And then apparently there have been people there since Keith has left who have experienced some strange activity. So, did you dig into the history much? Because there's not much history.
I didn't. No, because it was so new.
So, something Eric and I talked about before we sat down was that not much about this is set down very well chronologically. So we're going to talk about...
It's a shotgun effect at best.
We're going to talk about the things that they lived through, the things they experienced, but if we get things out of order, just understand that the sources we pulled from didn't always lay out like this happened and then this happened. And then, so for me, I sort of laid mine out in a series of escalating events. So you start with the mundane things that you'd expect with any haunting, then you build up to the really horrific things that happen towards the end. But basically, you have this home in the Seattle suburbs, I believe was built in 2005.
That's what I had, yes.
New construction.
Relatively new home.
Pretty new.
Not the normal haunting.
And in 2011, 2012 timeframe, I think you have Keith Linder and his girlfriend Tina, who the last name is not mentioned anywhere.
Tina Davis, I found.
Okay. I didn't find her last name.
And they had been a couple for about 2 years.
Yeah. Keith, I think, worked in the tech sector, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember what Tina did. But he got an opportunity to buy this house. I think he just got a first good, decent paying job in the tech sector after getting out of college, something like that. And, really was very, very excited. So him and Tina decided they're going to buy this house.
Which they found on Craigslist.
I
thought that was very
odd. Place
odd.
to find a house.
Yeah.
But, when we get further into the story.
Yeah.
Now, things started out pretty normal. You moved into a new house. things are a little strange. You get used to the neighborhood.
Going to make some noises and creaks.
Yeah, you hear some noises. You hear some things. You don't really know what kind
branch
of
rubbing against the window or something.
I mean, absolutely. They kind of didn't think a whole lot at first.
The very day they actually signed papers, the closing papers, they said they were sitting in the floor of the living room, and that's when they say the hauntings actually, looking back, first began. They heard a child's cough coming from upstairs.
And that kind of became kind of a through thing. Like, that happened quite a bit. But like you said, I mean, they just kind of put it off at first. They just thought, hey, it's a new house. It's going to make weird noises. We're not familiar with the area. They thought maybe it came from outside even.
Yeah, echoes, empty house, haven't got furniture and even stuff moved in at this point in time.
Well, within just a few months, things began to pick up and they really started thinking, hey, something's going on here. Again, this baby coughing sound, it started to happen on almost a nightly basis. And like I said, originally they thought it was somebody else, somebody outside, maybe the neighbors, whatever. But they realized at a certain point that this was coming from inside the home. And really, sometimes it was so loud it would wake them up at night. And it was just this sound of like a baby coughing, like a colicky baby. Now, after that, things began to disappear, simple things, car keys, silverware, usual things. And again, those things you can kind of say, well, I put the keys, whatever. You lose a spoon and not whatever. I have found spoons in the weirdest places at my house. You find them in the couch or
I found them in the trash can.
Yeah.
It's like, what'd you guys do? Just empty your entire plate, the silverware, into the trash can?
I gotta admit, I was guilty of that. Well, I went and dumped my whole plate and then realized I had used a fork with them. I'm like, oh man, I did dig. But yeah, I mean, things would disappear, but they were things that you could misplace very easily. Then they started to hear footsteps from areas of the house that no one was in. I mean, these are sort of those telltale signs, knocking noises in the night. And then at times they would even find items that didn't belong to anyone in the house. And that seemed really weird to me.
And again, what I came across was some small child's toys.
Children's toys, again, jewelry. I also found references to jewelry.
Well, Tina's jewelry in particular, she noticed started disappearing, which, as in many of these paranormal cases, you take a couple, whether they're married or not, living together, and this weird stuff starts happening. It does put them against each other. This
already started to stress them as a couple. She would blame him for taking things, and then when she found strange jewelry that didn't belong to her...
Well, she actually, I guess they separated for a period of time during this time, because Tina thought... what's his name?
Keith.
Tina thought Keith was possibly taking her jewelry, having an affair with another woman, giving this other woman her jewelry.
Yeah.
So... there was a time when they were kind of on again, off again. This was starting to already cause havoc between them.
This whole experience put a lot of stress on them as a couple. Now, of course, like we said, new home. Keith and Tina did not think that a 6-year-old house would be haunted.
Most people wouldn't.
Completely kind of, and again, this was their first experience with anything like this. Apparently, neither one of them had ever dealt with anything paranormal, and so. They just, they wholeheartedly were just like, okay, something weird's going on, but, they kind of just kept pushing it to the back of their mind. Now, their fears were confirmed one night that there's really something crazy happening here. As they were watching television on the couch in the living room, the couple watched as a potted plant levitated a few inches off the floor, turned a 360-degree circle in midair, and then dropped back to the ground, shattering the heavy vase that the plant was in. Now at this point in time, they were like, okay, there's something in our home. Our house is haunted.
How do you explain that? I mean,
now Keith would on occasion see an apparition that he called the Gray Lady. As a matter of fact, one time he specifically recalled watching her turn off the light in his office and then take off running down the hallway. And this was just 3 or 4 months after moving in. When asked about the Gray Lady, he said she was not see-through. She was not an apparition. She did not appear ghostly. When he saw her, she appeared as an actual person to him. He could have sworn there was a person in the house. Now, his description of her was that she looked tired, worn out, confused, mischievous, and nasty. I think I read somewhere, there was an actress he compared her to. I want to say like Angelina Jolie or something. It was like an Angelina Jolie if she was like bad. Now, I have that things got so bad, they finally did reach out for some help in 2012. I do have that date. And that was when they finally contacted someone about performing an exorcism. And apparently, this guy said, look, this process could work. This process might not do anything. It may make things worse.
Yeah.
And so just trying to maintain like some kind of grip on their sanity, they went through the process and things got quiet. And so to try to regain a sense of normalcy, they decided they were going to throw a big party, bring a bunch of friends, family over, get the neighbors over. You know, hey, we've taken care of this problem in our house. Things are getting back to normal. Let's get everybody together and just relax. So they bring everybody over. And at some point throughout the evening, some guests began to complain a little bit. Some people felt they were being touched. Others felt as if they were grabbed by an unseen force. Some people were getting ready to take a drink and got shoved and wanted to blame somebody, but there was no one there. Other people said they felt like their hair was being pulled. And then suddenly, just to bring the party to a screeching halt, a potted plant levitated off the floor and was thrown across the room to smash. So, hey, something happened.
Hard to explain.
And this was in front of everybody at the party. They all saw it. Oh, of course, at this point in time, Keith and Tina are like, okay.
Party's over.
Well, one, party's over. Two, this place is still haunted. And things got even weirder and more intense the longer they stayed in the home.
Now, as Bill said, it was kind of hit and miss there for a period of time, but like one of the semi-common things was Keith and Tina would return home. Maybe they went out to eat or something, and they would come, unlock the door, and they could hear a child giggling, laughing, running across the upstairs. It got to the point where Keith was starting to get a more violent nature because of some of these things happening, and would race upstairs. Who's here? Show yourself. I mean, this kind of deal. Of course, no signs of anyone. They also noticed that, especially in the bedroom, a ceiling fan seemed to be a precursor for when something was about to happen. Like they'd be laying in bed watching TV, and the ceiling fan would be like almost someone quickened it, where you can pull the cord and make it go faster. It'd go fast for a few seconds, and then it would slow down, and then it'd stop. It would maybe start vibrating. They said they learned over a period of time that's like, okay, get ready. Something's about to happen. The TV would flicker off, on, change channels. The radio would come on. Just random, more poltergeist-like activities. I think
there was one instance where like the radio or no, the TV came on and it kept playing the same Katy Perry song over and over.
Yes.
They called that like the Katy Perry Day or whatever, but it was, I
like
guess at one point it was
loop.
It was unplugged even at one point.
Yep. I think they went over and maybe unplugged it and it just kept playing. So during all this, Keith had the idea, and especially with his background, he decided to install the first wave of many security systems, cameras and stuff. And now some of the story I read said he did this to kind of help Tina feel more comfortable when he wasn't at home and she was there by herself. And again, I didn't find what Tina did for a living. She may have worked from home or may have spent more time at the house than he did.
I have it documented that she worked outside the home, but I don't have what it was.
Okay. Well, by putting the security systems in, their thoughts was, one, we'll be able to maybe catch some of this stuff, prove it that we're not going insane. And two, maybe put up a barrier. And it did seem to slow it down. They were a little disappointed. He was the first to say that, the many things we thought we would catch on camera, floating pots, breaking stuff, didn't show up on the camera. It didn't. The camera was always at a wrong angle or whatever, which again, the Debbie Doubters was like, well, yeah, of course, because you were making all this up, Well, he actually started his own website, and they started to document and to share some of this stuff, basically saying, we need help. Has anyone else got anything like this that's going on? And so they started kind of sharing some of this stuff. Bill had mentioned the Gray Lady. In the summer of 2012, Keith had what he described as one of his most strangest encounters. It was one evening in the summer of 2012. He was working in an office on the computer, which from what I understood, was another bedroom at the end of the hall, kind of converted. Suddenly, while he was in there, it's like the lights went out. Now, Keith rolled back in his chair to, look in the doorway down the hall, fully expecting to see Tina there, like, hey, hon, it's time to come to bed and turn the lights off on you or something. And he said at first he looked and he saw an outline of a woman, a little bit shorter than Tina, a little bit more frail, and said she walked towards him and glared at him sitting in the room like, how dare you be in my house? And said he, rolled back in the chair, got up and started to go towards her, and she just like turned her back towards him. And then I thought this part was really weird. there's a utility room door, apparently right there by that bedroom upstairs, and said she ran into the door. Like, a ghost apparition should be able to pass through it. It was physical enough, he said, that she ran into the door 2 or 3 times. And then finally, woof, it went through.
Like she's trying to figure out her powers.
I'm new to this whole ghost thing. I don't know how this works.
You guess you got to believe.
But he thought that was very strange and said she went into the laundry room, and ironically, it did appear she was carrying like a laundry basket. So, he thought that was really strange. Now, later on, summer of 2012, Keith and Tina were laying there in bed again, and all of a sudden, somebody slammed their bedroom door shut. And the couple at this point were starting to get used to this type of behavior. So nervously, they laughed it off and rolled over and went to sleep. I'm not sure I could have done that myself. No. But the following morning, they went downstairs to the kitchen and they found every one of the cupboard doors open.
That apparently happened on a regular basis,
That became a normal thing after that night. Keith then decided to try to understand what exactly was going on, so he purchased another wave of security cameras. So I'm envisioning at this point, I mean, the guy probably had 20, 30 cameras set up during the house and all kinds of recording equipment. He did finally start successfully capturing some of these strange anomalies, like the cabinet door would open slowly. The front door opened and closed and slammed shut pretty periodically, even though if it was locked. So all of that was going on. Then we had an event in the fall of 2012. Keith was making a recording upstairs on this website that he had done. And he had just finished smudging the upstairs hallway, burning like some sage. And, he was trying everything at this point. And while he was doing one of the recordings, the front door downstairs opened and closed very quickly. Now, later that night, he went down to investigate. There was nothing there. But later that night, Keith decided he wanted to test something. So he took a Bible and he opened it up to Psalms 91 and he left it in the downstairs living room on kind of the end table. Now, make a note of this story because it comes back. When he awoke the next day, the Bible was entirely gone. So again, kind of make a mental note of that. This comes back later with kind of an interesting twist, which brings us to 2013.
Yeah, in 2013, I guess because of his work in the tech field, Linder became a beta tester for the Xbox 360. And I really like this part of the story, which included a Kinect. And apparently as part of the beta testing program, obviously, the things he was doing were being monitored. He was testing this technology, this new video game system. Microsoft engineers have allegedly reported that while monitoring the performance of the Kinect, they would routinely note that it was picking up shadowy figures and softball-sized orbs that would float around that they could not explain. They were not people in the room. The camera wasn't detecting anything. The motion sensing was detecting something.
Did you see some of the photographs online? There was actually a couple that, I don't know if they were reenactments. It stated they were some of the photos. It looked like big, ooey gooey balls of tar.
Yeah.
Not translucent, like see-through at all. It was very weird.
Yeah, that is
floating around like around him and above the ceiling.
So as this escalates, continues to get worse, they got to the point where they were being woken up at night by loud bangs and crashes. They were so loud that the couple knew that structural damage was being caused to their home. There was no way. You couldn't have something this loud and not have damage. It seemed mainly to come from the attic, but they never found any evidence of any damage. It would just be so loud, it would I would say it was probably almost shaking the house, if not actually shaking the house. And they just knew the house was going to collapse around them. But they never did find any evidence of that. Sometimes they would see silverware and plates levitate off the table and then smash to the floor. The doors would open and close like Eric was talking about. Objects would get thrown around the room at random. It started with sort of relatively simple things, but at a certain point, scissors and knives were being flung around. I mean, so hard they were being driven into the walls.
That's some scary stuff.
Yeah. Electrical issues became common. So common, in fact, there was one day that literally every light bulb in the house on the second floor exploded at the same time.
Shattered glass, yes.
And then, as if all of this isn't bad enough, things start to take an even darker turn.
On January 22nd, 2014, Keith fell down the steps with a notable injury of a torn ligament in his leg. he was questioned about that of why he fell, if he felt he was pushed. At first he said, no, I wasn't pushed. Now later on, years later, he did kind of imply that he was pushed down the steps. So we're not real sure.
And that kind of is a through story here, like a thread that kind of runs through it.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't believe Keith's story.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think he's making a lot of this up. And again, it goes back to the video footage and all. And again, if Microsoft engineers, no one's actually heard from Microsoft.
Yeah,
I don't think
there's no like documented letter or anything.
That's
why I questioned even the photos. I think they were reenactment, but anyhow, Keith had hurt himself with a notable injury of like a torn ligament in his leg. Now, this put him kind of bedfast for a couple weeks. While he was recovering from the injury in his house, the entity of the home seemed to come back with a vengeance, and he felt it was because, he wasn't getting out of the house. He wasn't going to work. He was there at the house more. And, from what I understood, they had him sedated. So he was napping in and out, quite a lot during the recovery. But he remembers being awakened, feeling something, in his words, jump into the bed with him. Something that he described was what he would think would be more of like the size of a house cat, which they did not have. Jumped in the bed and said you could feel it like it was getting closer to him coming across.
Ugh.
Yeah. He said as he felt it getting closer, he kind of got the nerve and he kind of gently rolled over, looked over his shoulder, and he said, I could see indents in the sheet, and not like just sitting there, but like something was walking, leaving footsteps, so to speak. But he said, I saw nothing doing it, just, So he did sit up in bed, and he said, I noticed the energy levels in the room. He goes, the first time I noticed this was just like it was ready to go ablaze. He said the walls were crackling. The best way he could describe it was like if you wadded up tinfoil and put it in a microwave oven, you could hear this sizzling, this energy almost like running through the walls. And he said you could almost see like dust and cracks and stuff in the walls. Needless to say, that kind of freaked him out a little bit, but here he was bedfast, so he really couldn't go anywhere until Tina got home. So he was confined up there. He set up some extra cameras trying to record it. Again, he's under medicine. He's dozing in and out. I'd be afraid to go to sleep. I'm not sure what the heck you do. It'd be kind of crazy.
Well, another violent incident happened in the spring of 2014. I don't have the exact date, but apparently Tina had just left for work when Keith heard the fire alarm go off. Now, he was in the shower, so he jumps out, grabs a towel, wraps it around him real quick to see what's going on, steps out into the hall, and as he does, he feels like something go past him, like something rushes through, but he doesn't see anything. He actually literally watches from upstairs as the front door opens and closes violently. He looks around, he's trying to figure out what's going on. He sees smoke coming from the second floor, so he figures house is on fire. He runs to the front door to get out, but the door refuses to open. He cannot open it no matter what he does. So trapped in the house, potentially the house on fire, he calls 911. Every time he tries to say his name or his address, the connection breaks up so bad that the 911 operator cannot hear what he's saying. It takes 4 tries for him to get enough information for them to know where he's at so they can dispatch someone to come to him. I guess he calls Tina also, and she turns around and comes home from work. So he's out. He gets out of the house finally. Fire department arrives. Tina's there. They start checking out the house, and I guess a poster on the wall upstairs in one of the bedrooms or something had caught fire. I remember
reading that, yes.
No one can figure out how or why it caught fire. There's literally nothing in the room that should have caused it to happen. So,
well, I'm going to take us to March 30th, 2014. So about that same kind of time frame, things just, as Bill said, continued to kind of escalate up to this day. And now we go into kind of the double down situation. Now on this day, March 30th, 2014, Keith and Tina heard a noise upstairs at their bedroom door. And when they approached the doors themselves, they were allegedly ripped off the hinges and thrown onto the floor. On or about that same time, the bedroom light came on and then exploded all the bulbs with shards of glass all across the room. That was the straw that kind of broke the camel's back, so to speak. Keith and Tina immediately retreated from the upstairs, and they attempted to reach out, basically due to a lot of the webpage that they had put up, to any paranormal investigation groups in the area asking for immediate help. Only one group, and I love the name of this group, No Bull Paranormal was able to answer the emergency call that very day. Jennifer, their lead investigator, immediately noted a low humming noise when she first entered the house. She described it as if she was standing next to a gigantic beehive. Now, immediately upon entering the site, the entire group from No Bull Paranormal found their cell phone batteries and even the batteries used to power all the cameras, all the recording equipment, all of them dead. But not to be beaten before they'd even started, the paranormal group regrouped at their vehicles out in the driveway, had a few fresh batteries, recharged all those other batteries before dusk, and were able to do an investigation later that night. The cameras that they did do that night successfully recorded a dense mist that had never been noted prior, but they said could physically be seen and appeared on the video footage. This mist first appeared like in the front porch area and seemed to follow them in the house when they went in. Jennifer, the lead investigator, decided to do another kind of saging session, which lasted an entire hour in that direct area, thinking if we let something in, let's try to let it know it needs to go back out. Upon completing the saging session, they said a prayer over the home, and the No Bull Paranormal group called it a night and returned home to review all the footage. Later that same night, Keith and Tina returned home and retired for bed for what they hoped would be some much-needed sleep, hoping the paranormal group, the saging and stuff, might at least buy him some time to get some sleep. But that was not to be. The couple was harshly awakened in the hallway as, once again, a smoke detector was going off. Beneath the newly rehung bedroom doors that Keith had fixed, that had been ripped off the hinges, he seen light flickering like that of a fire. As smoke began to seep beneath the door, or the crack of the door into the bedroom, the couple sprang out of bed, grabbed a fire extinguisher, and tried to make an escape. When they opened the bedroom door, they spotted the source of the fire. It was the Bible that had disappeared over a year ago, lying on the floor, still turned to the same page in Psalm, but now the pages were burning. They had continued lights exploding, glass, ransacked rooms. They said times it would look like they came home and they'd been vandalized, burglarized. A lot of Tina's jewelry in particular, again, started disappearing, causing strains on the relationship.
Yeah.
The alleged affairs that they were, Keith was giving away her jewelry to the new woman. It did cause the couple to separate a couple times. Keith, at times, he said, was at the home by himself. So I'm going to take us to Halloween 2014. Now, although estranged at times, Tina moved back in with Keith, and the strange occurrences seemed to just continue. Not lessen, not spike, but just continue. Now, the couple took photos and noted strange charcoal or sage ash-like marks on the wall.
Yeah. I read about those.
This was some creepy stuff.
And it wasn't like chalk or what it was. It was burned cattle and buffalo bone when they had it tested.
Yes. Where did they get that from? I mean, come on, if you're going to fake something. I mean, yeah. But at first it kind of started off as just kind of like some lines, like somebody might have threw their hand in it and then just kind of drug their fingers down. But later on, there began to be some crude writings. A message appeared, Die KL, which we assume would mean Keith Lander.
Yeah.
The numbers 666.
That was another thing that I think put people on the side of not believing. Because that is such a
cliche,
stereotypical, haunting, demonic kind of thing.
But this event supposedly took place on Halloween night of 2014.
There were also stick figures drawn on the walls in some places that same night, I believe.
Oh, okay. Well, Keith took the samples, as Bill said, this ash charcoal, to a friend, a specialist, and ran it under. And it was like buffalo bones and cow bones or something.
I think they called it bone black. But it had a name.
But it also had some blue and yellow substance that they couldn't identify. Throw it in there. Oh, here's an interesting story. On one evening, the couple laid there in bed in 2014, hearing what sounded like footsteps or clawing going up one of the walls. They turned their lamp on next to the bed and immediately grabbed a camera and filmed what appeared to be a dog's paw prints covered in ash, walking up, leaving footprints on the wall, on the ceiling, and then almost like go out on the ceiling to the window and disappear.
Wow.
So they thought that was pretty interesting and strange. Events seemed to kind of die down for a little bit, with a few exceptions. Keith started noting being poked and prodded. That was kind of something new. But he said it sometimes, if he did not pay attention, it would just increase. There was one time he felt he had been punched in the stomach. His ribs were even bruised at one time when he actually woke up, getting progressively more and more violent through that next phase. We fast forward to Halloween of 2015. Keith was filming in his office, and 3 candles seemed to be thrown off the shelf behind him while he was filming. About that same time, he heard a rustling noise, which he described as like branches of a tree blowing in the wind, maybe rubbing against the house. However, upon closer exploration, he found a ghost-like image of a middle-aged woman wearing a long white dress, carrying what appeared again to be a clothes or a laundry basket, possibly a wooden box. And the rustling noise he heard was from her long dress rubbing against itself and the floor, basically dragging it across the floor as this woman walked past the bedroom door. She made no acknowledgement this time to Keith, although he stood only a few feet from her inside the room, and he watched her vanish through the doorway of the laundry room again upstairs. So apparently she'd figured out how to pass through the door at this point.
She figured it out.
Yeah. Then there was one other case that I wanted to note. This is, again, Keith being escalated. He's getting flustered. He's getting aggravated. Nobody seems to be able to help him. He was, I believe, downstairs, and a childhood piggy bank, and it sounded like it was made of glass or ceramic, that he had since his childhood days, was on a bookcase. As he walked by, something flung this off and shattered it with change, in particular dimes, it seemed to be, all over the floor. Now, Keith immediately started picking him up. He was a little, disgruntled. This was a childhood memory of his that he had kept all these years, and now it's shattered. He starts picking up the dimes, and he notices the dates on all the dimes are 1969, which is the birth date or birth year of Keith. He didn't remember anything about a rule of only putting the year he was born dimes in there.
That's kind of weird.
So he demands to this being, creature, spectral, whatever, that's fine. Do it again. Make more appear right now. And immediately he said it was like someone had a handful of dimes and dropped them on his head, and it rained down on the floor.
This is the best money-making scheme of all time. Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah? Make more dimes appear. You know what?
Yeah.
Make $1 million appear.
Make it be dollar bills.
You're so powerful.
Rain in here. Now, over the next several months, this seemed to be a reoccurring thing. Random 1969 dimes would be placed all throughout the house that he would find.
It's weird.
Weird.
I did not find that.
Yeah.
Well, after No Bull, I guess the next group to come investigate was none other than the Travel Channel's own Ghost Adventures team.
We've talked about them before.
They stayed there for but a single night. And when they left, they said they had no evidence to support any of Keith's claims.
Yeah.
Which also leans heavily into the camp that Linder might not be telling the whole truth.
And to Bill's point, all night I found literally was 5 hours.
Yeah, I did find reference later to being 5 hours.
Not a big investigation, it seems.
So after this, Linder said he went through a very dark period of things. He was hoping to get proof. He thought he was losing his mind. Like, if these things are literally not happening to me, then what am I going through? And, he thought he might be going crazy. Well, the next to investigate was Don Phillips. Don Phillips was a paranormal researcher from the UK. I guess he's part of a large group, sort of an international group. And Phillips and his team spent 2 weeks in the home.
There you go.
They revealed their findings in a documentary entitled Demons in Seattle Uncovered, which leads me to believe they found something.
Yeah.
They did gather 427 recordings that captured possible EVPs, 28 of these direct responses to questions asked. So they had some pretty clear evidence there. They claimed to have a video of a shadow moving near a motion detector. And though they didn't see any of the writings or symbols appear on the wall, they did claim that they made direct contact with the apparition, stating that the main poltergeist was an elderly woman with a disheveled appearance, scattered hair and torn clothes, which kind of goes to the gray lady. And she seemed to have a mix of confusion, fear, and anger They also said they made contact with the ghost of a small child,
There you
which
go.
could explain the coughing. They assumed, again, source of the coughing. At one point, Phillips himself crawled under the house to record some EVPs and came back with one that clearly said, "I want more. I want more." What did it want?
Hmm.
One member of Phillips' team said she plugged in her phone to charge and kind of left it sitting on the sofa there. As she walked away, she watched the phone basically jump up and do a cartwheel off of the sofa. She also said that she felt that the haunting was mostly of a Native American presence, but it was also strange to her because in the house, it almost felt as if it was a portal where spirits could come to come home, is how she phrased it. Now, Phillips would say when asked, as far as the house being haunted, yes, it is. Carissa Hartley, who was also one of the chief researchers on the U.S. side of things, said, quote, 100% of everything Linder has written about did happen. I know his story is unbelievable because it's so extreme, but this is one of the most extreme hauntings I've ever investigated. She stayed there for 3.5 weeks in 2016 and said the first week was uneventful. They kind of just went through the normal motions of living in the home, but that after a week, things became frightening. One specific incident, she was sitting on the sofa in the living room and began to hear like sounds charging at her from all directions. She described it like a stampede, just coming at her from every direction. She said every night motion detectors in the halls would go off and they would stop when they asked them to. So like, hey, quit tripping that motion detector, and then the sound would stop.
Courteous ghosts, at least.
Well, and then as soon as they were about to fall back to sleep, they would go off again.
Okay, maybe not so courteous, Joe.
Her last day there, she said, was her scariest. Now, it was already her scheduled last day. She didn't leave because of this, but she said she had just laid down to take a nap, and she awoke to feel like she was being suffocated. And when she looked over, she saw a shaggy-haired man in the bed next to her. Not transparent, not see-through. It was like a person in bed with her. She began to pray out of fear, and the figure disappeared. She said, quote, I've never seen anything like this in my life. I could feel him. I could smell him. He was solid. It was as if the person was laying right next to me.
I think that's the first mention of a man
Now,
that I ever came across anyhow.
Now, local historians and paranormal experts said that the hauntings could be tied to an Irish settlement that existed on the land over a century before, and the families, of course, buried their dead nearby. So, after 4 years of living with these specters, not only did Keith and Tina call it quits on the house, they called it quits on each other as well. The stresses of what they had gone through, the breaches of, what they thought were breaches of trust in the relationship. I mean, it was just too much.
Too much.
And so after leaving the house, they separated. Now, despite the hauntings, Keith was able to sell the house within just a few weeks. And according to the new residents, there is still stuff happening in the house to this day. Now, Keith, unfortunately, has not been able to escape what he encountered in the home. As he says, even now, after moving to a new apartment, he still routinely experiences ghostly activity, as if maybe some of the stuff from the Bothell house has followed him. Now, he has written a book, The Bothell Hell House, Poltergeist of Washington State, which was released in April of 2018, and that sort of described his and Tina's experiences. In August of 2019, he released Poltergeist of Washington State Part 2, and I believe he intends to release a third volume, which is sort of I think he said like a scientific analysis of what they went through. Now, Linder did reach out to the family who lived in the home before him, and they lived there between 2008 and 2009. And they said they, too, experienced a paranormal activity. And just warning, I do get into some pretty dark stuff, so if you want to skip ahead about 3, 4, 5 minutes. Now, the wife, Rhonda, said living in this house was like living in hell. That's how bad it was. She said they experienced the footsteps, the slamming doors, electronic malfunction, shadowy figures, feelings of being watched. She said even in herself personally, she began to have suicidal thoughts. She started drinking heavily. She had depression. And even attempted suicide 3 times while living in the home.
Ooh.
And even after she was contacted, Rhonda did eventually end her own life by stepping in front of a moving train in Missoula, Montana on August 15th, 2016.
Wow.
So she never really escaped the house either, you could say. And I believe Keith said some of the figures he saw resembled her. And this would be before she passed away. So whether they were copying her or something like that.
Well, a couple things I'll kind of wrap up here. Whether you believe Keith or not, there was some might say there's quite a lot of proof. The Debbie Doubters might say, well, any of that can be fake. So, seriously, we're going to be divided at best in 50-50. One of the things that Keith did probably did not help him at all. If you're familiar with any paranormal or exorcism type deal, he had reached out to the Catholic Church, it had said several times. And again, it's very hard to date when they came. It appears there was some Catholic priests that came. There was some attempts.
Yeah, they absolutely brought in some people to help.
I came across something that stated because of his frustration and not getting the answers, he himself took it upon himself to attempt several exorcisms himself.
Well, if you want to throw back to just a couple episodes where we talked about Father Malachi Martin,
yes,
you don't do that.
Yeah.
You have to be trained.
You have to be properly trained. So that's my point. And a lot of people are now saying, yeah, whatever it was, at least a part of it went with him. Well, that part of an exorcism is opening those gates, tearing down the boundaries, and then basically doing a battle.
Well, and again, if you don't know what you're battling with, which it sounds like they never really understood what was going on.
Yeah.
That's a key part of it.
I don't think that helped him. Whether you believe him or not, that did not help him. Another thing, and I don't know really how this occurred, as Bill had mentioned, Ghost Adventures, went there, spent a whopping 5 hours overnight. Yeah. We didn't find anything.
I think
they came back in Halloween of 2016 and made this part of their Halloween special for the year. Now I ask, if you didn't find anything,
yeah, why go back?
Why would you go back? And why would you make it part of your Halloween special? But they did say
well, our Halloween special is a little goofy. So maybe.
Okay. They did, I think, find a few more things, but again, it wasn't like definitive proof. Oh yeah, we were totally wrong. But it does make you wonder what made them come back. Was it because of the backlash, maybe from the community? And because he was promoting this entire thing on a webpage, and he may have put in there, Ghost Adventures came and they stayed 5 hours and said they didn't find nothing. Okay, guys, we're getting kind of painted in a bad light. Yeah. Maybe we ought to go back and give it another once, more thorough.
Was it time for headlines, Eric?
I think it is. HeraldNet.com, online newspaper for Everett, Washington, November 18th, 2023, by Talia Van Sestine, I believe is the way you pronounce her name, reports on another pretty creepy phenomenon that's been occurring in and around Bothell, Washington. Bothell. It's just so weird, lifelong resident Lisa Kuhn said as she stared up at the sky. Kuhn and her husband, Mitch Evans, often watched the crows swarm over the city from the windows of their home. Evans said these crows even turn the sky black on some winter nights. There are so many of them. Thousands upon thousands of crows have gathered nightly at the University of Washington's Bothell campus for at least 14 years.
Apparently that campus is haunted as well. I stumbled upon references. Originally, I thought there might not be enough with just this house.
Might need some filler.
And I thought there might need filler. But yeah, apparently there's a lot going on in that town.
Well, the murder, which is the technical definition of a group of crows, or a group, and Bothell can reach a peak of 16,000 birds.
That's a lot of crows
at a time. Even those who witness this phenomenon regularly are still in awe. And on Wednesday evening, standing close together, the couple had a front row seat as these massive black plagues descended on the trees behind the UW Bothell football field. Close to 200 people attended the annual Crow Watch, featuring several presentations about crows and an innovative way to watch the birds at dusk. Now, observers began crowding around the North Creek Events Center, overlooking the football field there at about 4 p.m., and almost an hour before the crows, started to land, many held binoculars and cameras in anticipation to the crows' arrival. I mean, this is quite a spectacle of events for 14 years that's been occurring. At about 5 o'clock, close to it, the crows stopped hovering and started landing on campus buildings, on trees, light poles, and so what. Many swooped even lower to the ground, swirling almost 30 feet away from onlookers in like massive blankets, almost like they were looking for a place to land on the people's heads. That would be a little frightening. Between the football field and the tennis courts, Most of the crows settled into nearby trees, but a small group huddled on the tennis court, unfazed by the people who moved as close as they could, often within 2 or 3 feet. Now, a facility of the UW Bothell suspect the 58-acre site on campus became a roosting area for crows about 2009 because the trees in the nearby wetlands were tall enough, at least to provide nighttime protection. Crow experts said the campus is also a central location for the birds to gather, beckoning them from cities across King and Snohomish counties. Ursula Valdez, a lecturer from UW Bothell, discussed how media influences public feelings about birds in the presentation at this year's Crow Watch. She mentioned Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds and how the 1963 film played a significant role in making people very weary of crows. Now, to each their own, but for this guy, I grew up not only familiar vaguely with Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, that was a little before my time, but I've watched it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
But what comes to my mind is Brandon Lee and
The
Crow.
That's a whole lot of dead guys.
To me, yeah, crows have always been a type of guardian, protector, escorts, if you will, between the veils.
I mean, even Native American lore, I think.
Yes.
It's a rule you don't kill or harm a crow.
So, yeah, Bothell, Washington, you got some freaky stuff going on up there, my friends.
Well, we're going to continue looking at weird stuff in Washington. From onlyinyourstate.com by Lisa Salmons from July 12th, 2022. Explore the spooky Maltby Cemetery, then visit the haunted Owl and Thistle in Washington. And Maltby was one that I was maybe going to have to use, I felt maybe needed as filler. So, again, more in that same general area. You tend to see suggestions for creepy road trips in Washington in the fall, but of course that doesn't mean you can't enjoy spooky places all year round. And trust me, you're talking to two guys who love that stuff. So we do it all year round. This day trip to sites near Seattle include a cemetery that's the subject of spooky tales, and then afterwards to a great pub that's allegedly haunted. Woodinville is a suburb of Seattle that looks pretty typical, but visitors may be unaware of the creepy urban legends that surround the cemetery here. The Maltby Cemetery is said to be one of the most haunted cemeteries in Washington. There are so many ghost stories surrounding the graveyard, it's hard to keep track of them all. The most famous legend is regarding the 13 steps to hell. That's spooky. There was a staircase that was once in the cemetery, right in the middle of the cemetery, and the steps seemed to lead nowhere, going down into the earth. It is said that they led to a family's underground tomb, and allegedly if you walked down the steps, you could suddenly get to a point where you couldn't hear anything above you, even though you were only a few feet below ground. Turning around towards the bottom would allegedly show you a glimpse of hell. According to local stories, people would sometimes go down the steps and never return. Now, the steps were demolished decades ago, but the legends still persist. Now, after visiting the Maltby Cemetery, you could head over to the Owl and Thistle. It's about a half-hour away in Seattle, and this Irish pub is located in a building that dates back more than 100 years. And according to local legend, it is haunted by a ghost that enjoys playing the piano in the bar when everyone's gone home. Employees and guests alike often report feeling cold drafts of air blow by, even when the doors are shut, or feeling a presence behind them. Even if you don't believe in the scary stories surrounding the bar, it's still a pretty good place to go to eat, according to the article.
Very interesting. Well, I guess that takes us to our questions of the episode.
Question time, Eric.
Question time. So I'll start off. I'm going to say, for whatever reason, business or pleasure, you are up in the Seattle, Bothell, Washington area, and you find yourself with some time to spare. Families doing their thing, Bill's just out doing his thing. You wander into a restaurant, and it's a semi-crowded. Guy's over in the corner, and you overhear a conversation that he is the new owner of the Bothell Hell House. And he's here because No Bull Paranormal Group has returned, and they're doing a ghost hunt right now. And you go over, obviously, and you start talking to him a little bit about it.
You say that.
You wouldn't do that?
But you ought to know me well enough to know
You're a little shy.
Going to strike up a conversation with somebody I don't know. Now, I am for sure going to listen in. But let's go with your story here. Let's say I do go over and get involved.
I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm going to coax your ego. As he gets up and leaves, he goes, "Aren't you Bill Weers of the Nightmares on the Lost Highway?
I've seen your little cartoon figure.
I've seen this. Yes, I recognize you." He invites you to come back to the house. And you say, "Well, yeah, I've got the whole night to spare."
Again, Eric, if a strange man invites me back to his house,
I've got candy.
You're making a lot of assumptions.
Okay. Work with me here. You go back to the house. You find no bull paranormal still there. Guys hit it off, gets talking, a lot of common stuff. They're just like, hey, man, we've got all the equipment set up. Why don't you go in and do your own ghost hunt for the night?
And you're asking if I would.
I'm asking, one, if you would, and if that answer is yes, you've got all the equipment you need. What rooms? How would you do it? What might you try to find?
I 100% do it.
There you go. That's my boy.
The motion detectors almost seem like a necessity, especially in the hallway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that upstairs hallway's hot.
I am going to post up either attic or top floor because that seems to be like pretty central.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to want cameras in the kitchen, maybe living room.
Well, yeah,
I'm definitely going to want a potted plant somewhere.
Yeah,
with
there
a camera on it.
Yes.
But yeah, I'd probably just hang out like in the upstairs and just kind of go room to room, I think. But yeah, definitely like the attic area. Because, I mean, attics and basements are always spooky.
Always
anyway.
creepy.
And they always talked about how they heard the noises. And I think the upstairs was definitely more of a hot spot. But yeah, I would definitely check out like the kitchen and stuff. And I'd want a camera in there. And again, I would want to go in with a potted plant just for that.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. With a camera on it.
And I wish I could claim I thought of that, but I didn't. So kudos to you. That's smart. Well, to answer my question, yes, I would. And I may be a little bit more bold than Bill. I would have probably kind of moseyed my way in the restaurant.
I could 100% see you go. I could 100% see you going, hey, I couldn't help but over here. You guys are talking about, what, like I could see you doing it.
Yeah.
Which is why we work better as a team, because I absolutely would not. But I would follow you.
Maybe I should have said we were there together.
Yeah, I would 100% follow you.
Well, I definitely, like yourself, I would focus more on the upstairs. That hallway, definitely. Yeah. One of the areas that didn't seem to get a lot of attention was that laundry room. There were several stories about the white lady, gray lady trying to pass through, sometimes successfully getting through the door, sometimes not. So I think I would maybe try to do something there. Maybe block the door with some clothes baskets, see if they would like move them out of the way, kind of mess with them. But the sensors, for sure. I wish I would have thought of the potted plant, but I won't steal that from you. The bedroom office areas, I think definitely set up there. And I am not one, first off, whenever I do a ghost hunt, I am always very respectful, especially walking in when you don't know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I am. So I would be extremely open, but not aggressive at all. Keith seemed to raise his voice and stuff. That's usually not my style, but I would almost try to communicate and show yourself, explain to me. I came to this thought of maybe having some cards written out, like a recipe card with some pre-answers to questions, and laid them out. I'm going to ask a question. If you would maybe move the card that has the closest answer to that. Why are you here? Maybe one card is I died in the house, or I was killed in the house, or, what time frame are you from? Put out some different cards. I wanted to kind of experiment maybe with something like that. I don't think that's ever been done. But again, trying to be very respectful. I guess that's the best answer I can put. What's your question?
Well, this one might be a bit of a thinker. Barring the ones we've already talked about, which we've talked about a lot, and I'm going to say Limp Mansion, Pythian Castle, Morris Mill. Can you relate a story of a haunted place you've been to? Not anything, preferably something we haven't talked about. Obviously, like I said, not like Limp Mansion, the big ones that we've hit on. But
I got
do
one.
You have okay.
My father's, not birthplace, but his childhood home was down in a little town called Nebo Plato area at East 32.
Yeah, I know where it's at.
Itty bitty little town. Most of our listeners, I don't even
Probably
think it
have no
appears
idea.
on maps for the most part.
Well, it's so small, it's always rolled in with Falcon.
Yeah.
Everything is Nebo Falcon.
But that's where my grandmother and my grandfather lived when my dad was a young teenage boy. Unfortunately, that's the exact location where my grandfather passed away. He had a massive heart attack while he was smoking out on the back porch, because grandma wouldn't let him smoke in the house, so he had to go out. But that is a rock house. which is a little unusual, not unheard of around here, but not block, but not brick, rock, like just random rocks picked up. And they didn't build this house, but this house is there. And there is also a huge spring that is there. And at the time when my aunt and my dad lived there, and I think the remnants, they were still there like 12, 15 years ago when we last visited. I assume they're still there. They had rocked a circle around this spring and even built wooden flumes at one time when my grandpa was alive in there. And that's what went out to the ponds to take care of the cattle and different things. But that place is actually supposed to be haunted. Many people through the years, because my dad still lives here and some people still remember that he grew up there, that's a common thing. Well, you used to live there. You know, did you ever have any strange things? And it's more of like poltergeist activities. And I have talked to a few of the people. It especially seems to favor the ladies. Maybe a slap on the behind. Maybe while they're laying in bed to slowly pull the sheets off of them. Now, let me say, that's not my grandpa. I truly, he wasn't like that. Maybe he is now. I don't know. But there just seems to be a lot of hauntings. Nothing bad, but just a lot of playful trickery kind of stuff. And I used to know the people who owned it. I think it is now since sold. Ironically, I've never been able to, I got to go in and tour it to look at it.
Yeah.
But never at a level of like, I would love to do a paranormal ghost hunt. Would you let me? It's kind of one of those things that's kept on the lowdown around here for whatever reason. I don't know. The place has been bought and sold many, many times. But I would love to go in there and try to capture some stuff because it is a little bit of a family connection.
Yeah.
So,
well, for me, when I was in high school, and I think I might have told some stories. I don't know. I'd have to, you'd have to go back and listen. I don't know. But my parents bought this old house on Highway 28. This was when I was freshman, I think. I was early in my high school career.
Your high school career?
Yeah. But when people found out that I lived in this house, they asked me like, oh, that place is haunted. Have you ever had anything happen in that house?
Very similar, yeah.
And I was just like, well, no, I don't think so. Now, this was 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and then like an entryway and then living room, pretty
good sized house.
And 2 stories. The downstairs bedroom that my stepsister used was part of the original construction and had exposed log on the interior.
Neat, yeah, like the old log cabin house, yeah.
And then had a like a pantry off to the side that was all like concrete rock kind of. So, we think that was like it was started as a cabin and then built up around it. And I don't recall anything, but I used to have people tell me that like, oh, we'd drive by and we'd see lights in the windows before anybody actually lived there. Like nobody was living there at the time. It was still for sale. Now, my brother recalls a time, and I kind of roughly recall, I don't remember it as well as he does, but the story he said is there was a little creek that ran behind the house, and then there was like a low water crossing on the road, not too far from where we were at. And he said one day we sat in the bedroom window on the upstairs and watched a light maneuver down the length of that creek. So
you actually saw that?
Through the trees. Now, I kind of remember it a little bit. He remembers it a lot better than I do. Now, I will say that when we lived there was a real bad habit of things being misplaced. I do remember specifically dropping something on the floor and not being able to find it and knowing that there was nowhere it should have been able to go. So it was like, on the floor.
Just gone.
Now, as far as living in that house, I don't have fond memories of it. But to be fair, my older stepbrother was living there at the time, and he was kind of a jerk. One of my most vivid memories of living there is we had this toy, and it was a rocket ball. And it was essentially like a hard rubber ball on like a bungee cord. And the idea is you would hook your finger in the cord, and you'd shoot the ball way up in the air, and you'd catch it.
Kind of like a big slingshot kind of thing.
Now imagine catching that in your groin area. Oof. Because my stepbrother thought that would be funny. And he shot it right at my crotch. And it's my most vivid memory of living in that place. Now, I don't recall a lot of weirdness happening there. I just know a lot of people in the area told me that place was haunted. But I never experienced anything. There was another place not too far from there that was supposedly haunted that we would go to as kids. And I say go to, trespass as we were kids, early 20s. So we should have known better. But it was this just abandoned house way out in the middle of the woods. You had to take a couple of back roads and a gravel road. And then the driveway was like a quarter mile long or something. And then had like trees down. So you couldn't even get to the place. You had to pull in and then get out and walk to it.
Probably cross a gate or fence or something.
Well, no, there was no gate or fences, but people swore up and down that place was haunted. Now, I will say, acoustically speaking, I don't know if it was just in the where it was located, but it did have a tendency to echo. And so if you were having a conversation with somebody, you would hear voices. But if you took the time to troubleshoot or whatever, diagnose, debunk, I mean, it was
it
just,
could be easily
it
explained away.
But the house itself, like to go into it and look around, that was like some Evil Dead level, like creepy. It had clearly been abandoned for a long time.
Probably
very
vandalized
rundown.
and
It had a raw earth basement that was just carved out, and there were like jars of stuff on the shelves that it was all murky and you couldn't tell what it was.
Is that a finger?
Yeah. It was, as far as the ambiance goes, it was creepy as all get out, but nothing weird ever happened there. But yeah, that house was supposed to be haunted. I had numerous people that I went to school with at the time. When they found out I lived there, they're like, "Oh, you live in the haunted house out there?" I'm like,
the haunted house.
I've never had anything happen other than the light, which again took place outside of the house.
Right.
So,
right. Well, we hope that you've enjoyed yet another episode installment of Nightmares on the Lost Highway. And let me just say again, if you're up around the Seattle, Bothell area, you guys got some freaky stuff going on up there. Flocks of murders of crows and newly haunted houses and schools. And so we may come back and visit again. But once again, we always appreciate all of our listeners and thank you for your support.
Hey, real quick call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us. If you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us, reach out. We want to talk with you guys.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.